All right.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Contra Costa Tail Spinners. Well, it's been an exciting week. Children are on the playground everywhere I go. People are running around unmasked. I have been venturing out quite a bit myself. All my activities are going. I have called the library, and they do not plan on opening their public rooms for another couple of weeks. Yeah, so maybe in 2 or 3 months, we'll have a room to go to. But right now, we're all together in this wonderful new Zoom world. And I'm going to welcome Liz back from Israel. A wonderful time, a safe trip, and she's back and traveling again. And so that's lovely. And so everybody, good evening, and we shall begin, Liz.
Okay. So we've got lots of great stories tonight and great storytellers. So we're gonna jump in and start with our featured storyteller for tonight, or for this month, and that is Clara Camunde. And Clara is a creative force. Her talents are so multiple in every kind of creativity, imagination, play, improvisation, theater, screen, everything. And we're lucky that one of those talents is storytelling. And it's that talent that brought her to Stagebridge, where she is the storytelling director and director of the Storybridge programs. Stagebridge, the senior theater in Oakland that is near and dear to many of us in this meeting. And so we're just thrilled. Lots of, we know you, we love you, and we're so happy that you are our featured teller. And please start us off, Clara.
So I just want to start by saying thank you for the invitation. I'm honored to be here, and it's it really, I think that the Contra Costa Story Spinners was one of the first storytelling events I went to many years ago when I moved to the Bay Area. And so I'm thrilled to be here. And my story today is a traditional Zulu tale. And as I was thinking, should I tell a personal story? Should I tell a, a fairy tale, whatever type of story? I thought about where stories come from. And this is a story that tells the story of where stories come from. And I'm going to solicit your help by, first of all, teaching you a very simple phrase. So, and the first part of the phrase is mama. Can everybody say mama? Oh, everybody's muted. Okay.
Mama.
Yeah.
Mama.
Yeah, and maybe when I put up my thumb, you can unmute yourself. And then the next part is Zifuna inzandaba.
Zifuna
inzandaba. So it's mama. Sifuna inzandaba. If it gets to be too much, let's not worry about it. But when I put my thumb up, mama, sifuna inzandaba. Had I thought about it, I would have had a little piece of paper to put up. But let me get started. So once, a very long time ago, so long ago that your great-grandmother's mother's great-grandmother's mother's mother's great-grandmother's mother's great-grandmother's mother's great-grandmother was not yet born. In fact, it was so long ago that it must have been close to the time when the first woman and the first man walked upon the earth. At this time, there lived a woman named Manzandaba and her husband Zenzele. They lived in a traditional home in a small traditional village. They had many children, and for the most part, they were happy. They would spend the day working their fields, weaving baskets, tanning hides, hunting, tilling, all the kinds of jobs that they did in those days to stay alive and to stay well. On occasion, they had some fun, went down to the ocean where they spent the day under the sun. And the children chased the crabs that crawled across the sand. They laughed at the beautiful birds that dove and dipped into the breeze. Now, Zenzele had the heart of an artist. He was a carver. Out of stumps of wood, he carved magnificent birds. And with his axe, he would chisel out of stone, impala, elephant, kudu, all kinds of beautiful carvings that just came to life at his touch. Zenzele was an artist. Manzandaba had the heart of a mother. And on the evenings, when their children said, Mama, Sifuna Inzandaba, her heart broke. Her heart broke because when they said, Mama, Sifuna Inzandaba, they were crying for stories. It was too early to go to bed, but too dark in those days to play outside or weave baskets or do anything. And the children were starved for stories. But stories, there were none. Manzandaba went to her neighbors asking for stories, but all she heard at her neighbor's house was the same cry, Mama, Sifuna Inzandaba. The children wailed, but nobody knew what to do. There were no stories. She listened to the wind. Perhaps the wind carried stories. Nothing. There were no stories, not a tale to be told. In fact, she wondered what it is that she could do. Zenzele had no stories. He had beautiful carvings, but no stories at all. And one day, Manzandaba thought and thought and thought and thought, and she came up with an idea. She said to her husband, Zenzele, if you promise to take care of the home, do the mending, do the washing, do the cooking, if you can believe it, I will go on a journey to find stories. And Zenzele agreed. So she kissed her husband and her children goodbye and set off in search of stories. She decided to ask every animal, every creature that she passed on her journey, if they had stories to share. Now, the first animal she came across was a trickster, Sungura, the rabbit. She saw his ears sticking up amongst the grasses in the velds, and she approached it. Sungura, Sungura, do you have stories? My people are hungry. My children are hungry for tales. Stories? Said the rabbit. Why, I have hundreds, thousands, millions of stories. Oh, millions of stories. Oh, please, please, Sungura, begged Mazandaba. Please give me some, that we might all be happy. Sungura said, I don't have time for stories now. Can't you see I'm terribly, terribly, terribly busy? Stories in the daytime, indeed. And off Sungura went. silly, silly Sungura, just disappointed, broke Manzandaba's heart with his lies. He had no stories. And so she sighed and continued her journey. And the next creature she came across was a mother baboon with her 13 children trailing. Oh, Fene, Fene, oh, I see you are a mother too. My children are crying for stories. Do you have any stories that I could share with them? Stories? Do I look like I have time to tell stories? What? With so much work to do to keep my children fed and safe and warm, do you think I have time for stories? You silly humans. I'm so glad I'm not a human. Silly human stories. Silly children crying for stories. And off Mama Baboon went with her children. And Manzandaba, all the more weary, continued on her way. And then she saw up in a tree, she saw an owl. And she had heard about the wisdom of owls. Oh, Kovu, Kovu, she called. Kovu, do you have stories? Now, this was the daytime. This was Owl's nap time. Who dares to disturb my sleep? Who is so rude to wake me in the daytime? Oh, I'm so sorry, Kovu, she said. I'm so sorry. I just simply wanted stories. Who are you to ask me for stories? And off to a higher branch up in the tree flew Kovu the owl. Oh, dejected again, Manzandaba continued. I'm sorry, something got into my eye. Manzandaba continued her story. And next, as she walked along, she saw in the distance big ears flapping. And she saw, oh, it was the elephant. Ndulovu, Ndulovu, she ran towards the elephant. Ndulovu, do you know where I might find some stories? My people, my children are crying, are weeping every night for stories. And the kindly elephant said to her, I have no stories for you, but I see how sad you are. So I will give you one piece of advice. There is one person who flies between heaven and earth and might be able to give you the stories that you are looking for. The great eagle, Ndege Nkubwa, might tell you the stories that she finds as she circles the earth and as she dives to the sea for her food. And so Manzandaba decided to head off to the great ocean where her and her family spent so many hours having fun. And as she approached the ocean, she saw the great bird dive down and grab a great fish out of the water. And she says, oh, Ndege Kubwa. And at that, the eagle dropped her fish and was just absolutely incensed. Ha! What is so important that you caused me to lose my supper? Oh, great and wise Ndege Kubwa, she began. Now, the eagle, she was kind of vain and puffed out her chest with the flattery of being called great and wise. And she liked hearing this and decided to come down closer to hear what Manzandaba was asking for. She said, my people are hungry for stories. I have been searching for days now, and no one has stories. But Ndlovu, the wise one, told me that you might have some stories for my people. And the eagle said, well, even though I am quite wise, I don't know everything. I only know of the things that are here on the face of the earth and that are up in the sky. But of stories, I can tell you nothing. But if you listen to me closely, I can tell you exactly where to go. And she said to Manzandaba, wait here until the full moon rises. And on that night, the great sea turtle will rise from the ocean. And when the great sea turtle rises from the waves, you must tell the great sea turtle exactly what it is that you want. Well, the great sea turtle has been where no one else has ever been. And I'm sure there, if you climb up on its back, you will find stories. Oh, great and wise Ndege Kubwa, thank you. I thank you. And off the eagle flew. Manzandaba waited a week, 2 weeks, and on the third week, the full moon rose from the horizon. And as it rose, she saw the great sea turtle leaping out of the waves. And she called to the great sea turtle. And this great sea turtle came towards her slowly. And she told the great sea turtle what it was that she wanted. And the great sea turtle said, climb upon my back, and I will take you to where you can find stories. She climbed on its back, and they dove down deep into the ocean. And as they dove down deeper and deeper, she looked around in a world full of astonishment. Fish of colors she had never seen, whales, animals she had never imagined. And they dove deeper and deeper and deeper, down, down, down into the depths of the ocean, where they came to the kingdom of the queen and the king of the ocean. And as she entered their palace, she saw magnificent corals, magnificent colored sands, beautiful seahorses, and she was in awe. And she was led in to the great chamber of the queen and the king of the ocean. And they said, woman from the earth, what do you look for in our world? And she told them, my children, my people are crying. They are starving for stories. Will you give me stories? And the queen and the king of the ocean thought. And they said, come to us. You will spend the night with us, and come to us tomorrow, and we will have an answer for you. So she spent the night in the palace of the king and the queen of the ocean. And the next day, she was led once again into their great chamber. And the queen said to her, we have thought hard about this. We have never left our kingdom. And we would like to know what your world looks like. If you can bring us a picture, something to tell us about your world, we will give you stories. And Manzandaba, she thought, oh, how? She had an idea. She said, yes, I will bring you the most magnificent pictures of my world. And with that, she climbed back onto the back of the great sea turtle and they rode back up, 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 until they saw reflections of the sunlight. And the great sea turtle dove up and deposited her at the sands. And she ran as fast as she could for days and days until she got home. And when she got home, she said to her husband, Zenzele, who had the heart of an artist, she said, Zenzele, your gift will bring us the gift of stories. And he said, my gift? How? And she said, the king and the queen of the oceans have asked for pictures of the earth. They want to see our world. They've never left their world, and they would like to know what our world looks like. And he said, well, how can I do that? I can't. A painting would get ruined if you took a painting down into the ocean. She says, but you can carve. You can carve pictures of our world. And I will weave baskets that show the pictures of our world. And so they went to the village and they said, we need the largest tree trunk in order for us to carve all the beasts of our world, all the peoples of our world, all the rivers, all the stars, all the clouds, all the trees, everything in our world, so we can take it back to the king and the queen of the ocean. And so they went into the deep forest and they found the largest baobab tree, and it took days for them to hew it down, but they hewed it down, took it back to the village. And then Zenzele took his axe to the trunk and he carved elephants, owls, rabbits, fish, beautiful, beautiful creatures of the earth. And Zenzele finished his job. And as he finished, the weavers of the village had finished their baskets, which showed the people and their homes and their gardens. And they waited for the next full moon. And before the next full moon, they traveled to the ocean and waited once again for the great sea turtle to rise up out of the ocean and come to bring Manzandaba down to the kingdom of the queen and the king of the ocean. And when the great sea turtle rose once more, they strapped the great big baobab trunk, carved so magnificently by Zenzele, onto the back of the great sea turtle. And onto that, they strapped the beautiful baskets depicting their world. And into one of the baskets went Zenzele. And the great sea turtle dove once more down, 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 deep into the ocean they went. And once again, she came to the chamber of the king and the queen of the ocean. And when they saw the carvings, they saw the animals that they had never seen, never imagined, trees, beautiful trees, mountains, lakes, they were enthralled. And the baskets, they said, thank you, Manzandaba. This is a beautiful gift. Once again, we invite you to spend the night with us and come back to see us tomorrow. And we will give you the gift of stories. And the next day, when Manzandaba went into the chamber of the queen and the king of the ocean, they gave her a large conch shell. And the queen said to her, Lift that to your ear and you will hear the stories. And she lifted it to her ear. And she heard whispers of stories. And she said, I thank you so, 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 so much. And then they gave her a necklace of cowrie shells to give to her husband, Zenzele. Give him this from us in thanks for this beautiful gift of your world. And the next day, she climbed back onto the back of the great sea turtle and they went back up, 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 up. And this time, they saw the light of the moon reflected. And when they had surfaced from the deep ocean, they landed on the sands. And there, the whole village was waiting. They had lit a great big bonfire. And as Manzandaba dismounted from the great sea turtle, she carried the great conch shell, and everybody wondered what this was. And she sat down, and everyone, child, grandmother, grandfather, aunt, uncle, mother, and father, they all cried out, Mama, sifuna inzandaba. And Manzandaba held the conch shell to her ear, and she said the immortal words, once upon a time. And that is the story of how stories came to be. But she didn't quite say once upon a time. What she said in Zulu was Kwesu Sukela, once upon a time. And the gift of stories came from the conch shell. And even today, if you hold a conch shell to your ear, you will hear whispers of stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. Oh,
Yeah.
you've taken us on a magical, magical journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've held a conch shell to my ear. I didn't even realize everything I was hearing. Have to listen better next time. Thank you. Well, we have lots more. Thanks to the great turtle, I guess, we now have stories everywhere, including Albany, New York, thanks to Beverly Schwartz, our next storyteller. We've really enjoyed having people come join us from far away. And so Beverly, please tell us a story.
Today I'm going to tell a story about the circus. It's a true story. The kids came into my classroom. The circus is here. Can we go? Can we go? When are we going to go? Oh, can we go and see the circus? Well, I was a new teacher in the school, just started teaching. I knew nothing of what they were talking about. What do you mean a circus is here? Well, every year the circus comes and we get to go and watch it. When are we going? When are we going? We want to go to the circus. So I said, let me find out. And I went next door to the next door teacher and I said, what's this thing with the circus? The P.T. Barnum and Bailey Circus comes every couple of years. They take the train up the Hudson River and they stop in Troy. And they march all the animals and all the other circus people up to the field house, which is only 2 blocks from here. And we watch the circus every year. I had never been to a circus, so I was just getting really excited myself and go, oh, can we go? Oh, the whole school goes. The whole neighborhood goes. The whole town goes and watches the circus come up the street. So when are we leaving? 5 minutes from now, the teacher said. And whoa, I went back and said, okay, get in line and here we go. And I said, oh, by the way, has anybody here ever been to a performance at the circus? There was a quiet silence, not one hand raised. And I said, you know, this is going to be my first time too. And off we went. We only had to walk 2 blocks and we're at the top of a big hill. The hill went down to the bottom of the town where the river was and the railroad tracks. We can see them far from the distance, and people from all over the town were on either side of the road that went down to where the trains were being unloaded. And as they came up, we were the very last group of people right before the door in the area where the circus was going to set up in the field house. We saw the elephants come, and they were all the animals besides the elephants, the tigers in their cages, and the horses and the dogs, and everyone was dressed up in their makeup and all their things that they would, costumes that they would wear during the circus time. There was jugglers, and they would wave, and they'd go up and give a balloon to some of the kids in the watching the parade. The kids were so excited. I had to say, stop, stay, don't go running anywhere. They were just so excited. And finally, after all the animals had passed, and the horses and the elephants and the giraffes, they even had giraffes that year. It was just amazing. The last to come were the clowns. And with the clowns were the children of the performers in the circus. The kids saw my class and they came towards my kids and they started talking. And they were juggling with the kids and they were just having a grand time with them. And my kids were so excited to meet and actually talk to some of the children and some of the clowns. And a clown came up to me and said, I can see that your children are really excited about going to the circus. I said, well, this is where they're going to see the circus. Neither them or I have ever really been to a real circus. And we're an inner city. Most of our kids couldn't afford to go. He says, I have an idea. If you meet me tomorrow morning at 9, I'll show you some of the things outside the RPI field house. And we'll have the kids actually get to see a lot closer all the animals and play with the circus children. They really like and enjoy meeting kids in different cities. I said, okay, I'll be glad to do that. I was more excited maybe then, but than the kids. And I didn't tell the kids anything till the next morning. When the kids came in, I said, don't take your coats off. We're going back to the circus. And they looked at me, really? Mm-hmm. And I told them we got a personal invitation from the clown that had come with the circus children at the end of the parade. And off we went. And as we approached the field house, you could see that they had set up outside on one side tents and trailers where all the performers lived and slept and ate out when they weren't performing. And the animals were all on the side of the field house. And as we approached, the clown was standing there waiting for us. And he said, welcome to the circus. And behind him, you heard the sss of air going into the balloons that they were getting ready for the day's performance. And as we walked around, we saw the animals. They were braiding the horses. They asked the kids who wanted to pet the horses, and they brought the horses up where there was a rope, and we got to pet the horses. We saw the elephants getting washed, and they would suck up the water with their big trunks, and they sprayed a little of us. It was amazing. The kids went, ah! They just shrieked with delight. And then as we walked past the elephants, one of the little boys said, oh, look at the big, I said, keep going, kids, keep going, And then we saw the dogs that were practicing and the kids that were, having hula hoops and having them jump through the hula hoops. And then the kids came back and said, we'll teach you how to juggle. And they were practicing with my kids juggling. The clowns were putting on their makeup outside. Kids liked seeing that. And the acrobats were walking around doing their stretches and stuff, getting ready to maybe perform or practice. As we got to the back area, the clown met us again. At that time, behind him, you could smell the rich, hot smell of hot popcorn and butter that they were now starting to pop for the performance. And the clown said to me, if you think your kids could stay in your seats, we'll let you in and watch a practice rehearsal of the circus. Oh, we also, can we go? Yes, but we have to stay in our seats. And as we walked into the field house, there was a bunch of clowns, 4 of them total. And they each gave us a bag of popcorn. Oh, there we were sitting, munching on our popcorn. And act after act came into practice. We saw the people that, climb up the ladders and do their acrobats, and they had the net below. And a couple times some fell and our kids were so upset. And then they realized, there was a net to catch them. We saw the elephants come in and perform, and they brought the lions and the tigers and practiced them with what they had to do and how they paw. And the kids would, they saw the clowns come in and practice getting in and out of their little cars. We pretty much saw everything that they were going to do. And then as we were done, after each of their performance practices, the performers actually came up to us and the kids high-fived them. Oh, we loved it. And they actually got to talk to them for a few minutes before they left. And the next group came in to practice. Boy, this was real up and personal. And I know I was going to remember it for the rest of my life. And I think they would too. When the performers were done, the clown came up to me and said, I hope you had a good time. And I said, this was better than the real circus performance. Not only did we see a performance, but we got the backside of the circus and we got to meet so many people. You were so kind and generous, the circus people here, to my class, and I really appreciated it. And then I said to the kids, we have to get going. We had kind of like not told anybody that I just said we were going for a walk, and they were probably wondering what happened to us. And as we left the front door, the 3 clowns, along with the clown that had invited us, were standing there and gave a balloon to each child and cotton candy bags so that we could have some later. Wow, we had been to a circus. And then the clown said to me, I have something for you so that you can tell your story every year about your class coming to the circus. And maybe they can come every year that we do march up the hill and see, you can find me and we'll have more tours for you. But he gave me something special. This was in the mid-70s. This was 75. He gave me 4 pictures of clowns that he had oil painted and drawn. And the circus Barnum and Bailey liked him so much. They made pictures of them to sell to people who wanted pictures of clowns. And he was so proud, you could tell that they had chosen him and his 4 pictures that matched the 4 clowns that were with us. And I framed them, and they're in my room at home now. And this is the clown that was so nice and generous that brought my children to the circus. And he autographed them and has all the history of the P.T. Barnum Bailey on the back of this picture. And I still have the 4 of them. And every time I would tell the story of the children, because after that year, unfortunately, they stopped in Albany, which was the town south of us. So our kids, that was the very last tour of the circus in Troy, New York. And this is the clown, exactly how he looked that met us that day.
Thank you so much, Beverly. Ah, what a touching story. What a touching story. And I loved your like all the sound effects and the smells and the sounds of the circus. You really, brought them to us as if we were there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. All right. Well, our Agnes, are you ready to go next? And then yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then let me, before I turn it over to you, Agnes, Jane, welcome. Good to see you. We were wondering, hoping you could make it. Can we just unmute yourself and see that we can hear you? Because Jane is going to come after Agnes. So I just want her to know that.
Sorry.
All right, great. Okay, so would everybody then unmute yourself, mute yourselves again and let us welcome Agnes Reedman. I can't wait to hear your story.
Oh, thank you. Well, before I start, I just want to say that I guess thanks to Zooming and not being able to be places in person, Stage Bridge has managed to find us a wider variety of storytelling teachers. And one of them is Sheila Arnold, who comes from all the way from, she doesn't come, she Zooms all the way from Virginia. And two of her, three of this session's students are here tonight. And I know two of us are going to tell. Liz took her class and told a few months ago or a few months ago. Sheila's forte is folktale, fairy tales, and social justice. And so what you're going to hear from me tonight is an original fairy tale within the idea of social justice. Once upon a time, there was a country, a joyous country, a cheerful country called the land of colors, stripes, and polka dots. Some of the creatures were so vividly colorful that they looked like they were made of neon. Brilliant pinks and oranges, fire engine reds, taxi yellows, purple's the color of a shiny eggplant. And some of the creatures were striped, orange and green striped, pink and gray striped, red and blue striped, and the stripes wiggled and jiggled as the creatures walked and moved around. It didn't even look like they were just walking, it looked like they were skipping at all times. Such happy striped creatures. And then there were polka dots. And the polka dotted creatures, some had polka dots as big as plates. Some had polka dots as tiny as freckles. On some creatures, the polka dots were all one color, and on other creatures, the polka dots were multicolored. Everyone was happy. And in charge and ruling over this land of colors, stripes, and polka dots were a queen and a king. And they were the color of brilliant blue, the bluest blue you have ever seen, royal blue. So blue. Well, not quite everyone was happy. I said everyone is happy, but there was an exception. The queen and king themselves were not 100% happy. You see, they had hoped for a baby for years and years, and they hadn't been able to have one. Oh, they'd done everything they could imagine. They called the fairies together and they asked the fairies to throw a giant party. The party would be to welcome the new baby. And the fairies went out and they ordered the best invitations, and they found the most brilliant caterers and the most musical musicians, and they invited everyone in the whole land, and they had the biggest party that you could imagine, and the people came and they ate and they danced and they sang. But after the party, there still was no baby. And one time the queen decorated a room just as a nursery, because she was sure that when the baby saw that room so perfectly decorated, the baby would come to live there. But the baby didn't do that. Well, years went by, and one afternoon, the king and queen came out on the balcony of their palace, and they said they had an announcement to make, and the announcement was that they were going to adopt a baby. So they called the fairies into the palace, and they said to the fairies, go out to all the corners of this land and find us the perfect orphan baby, and we will adopt that creature. And so the fairies went out all over the land looking for the perfect baby, and they found the perfect baby. And one afternoon, in a cloud, the fairies came into the palace, and they announced to the queen, we have found your baby. And the queen said, oh my goodness, I knew you wouldn't let me down. Let me see, let me see. And the fairies dispersed and moved away. And in the middle was the oldest fairy of them all. And she was sitting there rocking the baby. And the queen was overcome. She's, oh my goodness. And then she went closer to see the baby. And she laid eyes on the baby. This baby won't do. I cannot raise this baby. This baby is lime green. The king and I need a baby that looks like us. And so the fairies left again in search of a more acceptable baby. And they came back with a striped baby. And the striped baby had some blue stripes. So they were just sure that the king and queen would be satisfied, even happy with this baby. They presented the baby. Once again, the queen said, thank you. And then she looked at the baby, and her reaction was the same. I can't raise this baby. This baby does not look like me. I need a baby that looks like me. And so the fairies went away again. This time they found a sweet little baby with a blue polka dot all over her cheek, and it was circling a dimple. And when that baby smiled, that dimple went all the way to the edge of the polka dot. And the fairies were just sure that the queen would love this baby. And this time, both the king and queen were there. They brought in the baby. This time the king said, let me see the baby. And he went up to it, expecting to be very happy. But he was disappointed. This baby does not look like us. We are pure blue. We are brilliant blue. We are royal blue. This baby is not royal blue. We cannot raise this baby. And the fairies said, but what will we do? What will we do with these babies? And the queen said, I don't care. I don't care. I cannot raise these babies. So the fairies took the babies to a faraway place in the land that was still uninhabited. Now, a lot of the creatures happened to see the fairies taking these babies to this part of the land, and they realized that somebody's going to have to take care of these babies. And so they followed the fairies to that part of the land, and they stayed there to take care of the 3 orphan babies. And then gradually over the years, more people went there, more creatures, colored creatures, bright creatures, striped creatures, polka dot creatures. They moved to that area. And as more and more of the colorful, striped and polka dotted creatures moved to that area, the part of the land that had been blue, or that was left blue, was less brilliant, because without the contrast with the other creatures, it didn't look so bright, it didn't look so neon. Well, the land went on that way, increasingly divided, the blue increasingly dull. And a lot of the tourists who used to come stopped coming, but some still did. A few came to see the palace, to see the area around the palace. And sometimes you might hear them talking to each other as they observed this new land. And what you might hear is one saying to the other, how could it be that such a dismal country, such a joyous place, has such a happy and cheerful name? Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Lot of food for thought and for the imagination and for the eye, the ear.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, from the world of imagination, our next storyteller is a teller who brings to us adventures in this world, but the kind that most of us never have because we don't have the skills, the spirit, and everything else that Jane Cole has. Now, Jane has told a story. Jane told me that she has some updates on some things she's talked to us about before, and that it might take her several swaps to tell it all. So Jane, I'm going to set my timer for like 9 minutes because you have 10 minutes, and hopefully you'll hear it. And anyway, if you don't get to tell us everything you want to today, we welcome hearing the next part of the story next time.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay, please welcome Jane Cole.
So my dad's name was Puppy Cole. Now that seems like an odd name, but he came by it honestly. Born in 1912, Puppy was the youngest of 8 children. And he was the youngest of all the kids who lived in Michigan Heights on West Sunset Avenue in Sonora, California. That's gold rush country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reason that the kids called him Puppy was because whenever they were doing chores or playing, he always wanted to tag along. So they called him Tag Along Puppy Dog. Now, sometimes you didn't want to say, Tag Along Puppy Dog, hurry up, or Tag Along Puppy Dog, come over here. So soon enough, his name got shortened to Puppy. And if you were in a real hurry, Pup. Now, Puppy's family was a Dutch family, and they came to Sonora in about 1906. And they had a little farm with cows and chickens and rabbits and fruit trees and bees and vegetables. And in the spring, a big garden full of daffodils and tulips. Now, it turns out that Puppy was a cowboy in the way that those cowboys that have hats and boots just never are. The reason for that is that Puppy's father, Peter, was a very frugal man. And Peter always sent his children out along the county roads with all the cows, so the cows could have free grazing. So at last, little Puppy came to his turn to be the cow herder. And he tired of walking the cows out and staying with them all day and walking them all the way back to the farm. So Puppy was an inventive and creative little boy. And so he made a deal with one of the cows. And she let him ride. So he was a cowboy. Now around town, the boys that had horses, those kinds of cowboys, they teased a lot and let it be known that Puppy should have a horse. This was high on Puppy's agenda. Around the time Puppy was 8, he took on a paper route because everyone in their family worked. Now, Puppy would go early in the morning down into town and get his newspapers. He carried a big sack that fit over his head with a big pocket in the front and a big pocket in the back, and stuffed his newspapers. He walked all over town. Now, Sonora is a very up and down kind of town, up the hills, down the hills. And he would deliver his paper exactly where each customer wanted it. Not a casual throw, but an exact placement. Now, this made him very, very popular with certain persnickety customers. Puppy would have to go back into town, fill up his bags again, and go out again and again. He was not a very big boy, and this was hard work for him. Now, about this time, the newspaper Puppy worked for decided to have a contest. This contest was for their newspaper delivery boys, and the contest was to see who could sell the most newspaper subscriptions. Well, the prize for the contest was a pony. Now Puppy was a little boy with a big plan. That pony was going to be his. So he worked very hard selling newspaper subscriptions all over town. He went to businesses and people's homes. It was a big project. But there was another little boy who was from a valley town down below, and that little boy was equally industrious, and they were neck and neck, neck and neck. Who would win the pony? Well, Puppy was ahead, and something terrible happened. He got so sick. He was really, really ill. He was too ill to deliver his newspapers and far too ill to try to sell more subscriptions. So it looked like his chance for the pony was gone. But this is the part of the story where there's a hero. Puppy had a big sister named Lucy. And Lucy was what we always called a force of nature. Lucy was about 14 or 15 at this time. She went around Sonora. She talked to people. She persuaded people. She influenced people. And as it turned out, people who had never had a newspaper subscription before decided they needed one, even if they couldn't read, even if it was just for 1 month. Lucy persuaded people who already had a subscription that probably they needed one for the Mr. and one for the Mrs. Maybe one for the living room and another one for the back porch. You get the idea. Now, the townspeople of Sonora, of course, knew Puppy. He was all over town. He was a cute, freckle-faced, red-headed little boy. And they felt terrible that he was so ill, and they wanted to make sure he got that pony. The town really pulled together behind him. Well, when it came time for the newspaper to count up the subscriptions and find out who won, can you imagine? Puppy won. He won the pony. So Marianne, the pony, came to live with the Cole family on Sunset Avenue. And you can imagine how thrilled this sick, sad little boy was when he found Marianne arriving on Sunset Avenue. How much time do I have, Liz?
Sorry, you have about 2 minutes left. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll start the next chapter, set you up. So when Puppy's health finally improved, he began riding Marianne to pick up and deliver his newspapers. Now, as you may remember, he had many deliveries to make, at least for a while. Up and down the streets of Sonora, Puppy and Marianne brought smiles to the faces of all those customers and friends, oversubscribed customers and friends. Next month, we'll tell you about Marianne and the pony cart.
Thank you, Jane. We can't wait to hear chapter 2. Thank you. All right. Wow. Oh, a little just jiggle around I need because I want to get my brain ready for Bobby Kincaid. And after Bobby will be Linda Wright. So Bobby Kincaid has a book she's published, and I think some of you have heard a little about it. Tell us, Bobby. And this is the last story in it, I think you told me on the email. So very exciting, and we really applaud you and can support you.
It's been a lot of work. It's Damsels Overcome. And this is a story from Lang. He is the collector of many, many fairy tale books. And this is from the Brown book. And it's a appeasing story, but it's an interesting story. It's not very well known, I think. Raven lived between the forest and the farmer's farm. And she was out in the brook in her little arrogant way, turning over the rocks, looking for worms and whatever she could find, when Rooster came by crowing and crowing. And she said, what are you doing? He said, I'm inviting all the ones that I gave invites to come to Farmer's Feast. She said, well, I didn't get an invite. He said, well, you don't deserve one. You steal from Farmer all the time. So you just weren't invited. And with that, Rooster did another crow and he hopped up back to the farm. And Raven was pretty upset, but she didn't really come. And all of a sudden, here came Bear out of the forest, rumbling through. And she looked at Bear and she said, oh, you are really shiny and bright. He says, yeah, I've been invited to Farmer's Feast. And she says, oh, you have? Oh, you know why you were invited. He wants that fur for his rug in the winter. And Bear, who wasn't the smartest, looked at him and he said, are you sure? And she said, yes. And with that, he rumbled back into the forest. Well, then along came Squirrel. She's hopping along the fence, just chattering away, her tail twitching like that. And he flew up to her and she stopped and he said, Squirrel, you going to Farmer's Feast? She said, yes, I was invited. And he said, you know why, don't you? And she said, well, because I'm I'm a squirrel. He said, no, for that tail. Oh, that tail could do a lot of dusting for the farmer, and then he'll cook you on the spit. And she looked at him and she chattered and she wiggled her tail and she ran back down the fence. Well, she was pretty pleased with herself when along came Mrs. Sheep. Oh, she looked elegant. She had flowers around her neck and she had flowers in her fur, and Crow flew up to her in the road and said, Crow, excuse me, Raven, what are you doing? And Raven said, well, I'm to warn you not to go to Farmer's Feast. He's going to use you. And she said, well, I hope he does. I'm so tired of this fur. I hope he cuts it off and uses it. And with that, she bit Raven out of the way and she kind of fell into the dirt. Well, Raven wasn't too happy and she busted the dirt off, and then she looked over and here was Mrs. Fox crawling through the trees, and she looked at Fox and she said, and where are you going? He says, well, she said, well, I've been invited to Farmer's Feast. I know you haven't, and I suppose you're a little jealous. And Raven twisted her head back and forth and said, well, maybe, but you know why you were invited. That fur is so warm. He says, yes, it is warm in the wintertime. And, and Raven said, well, the farmer's wife needs a nice fur coat like that, and that tail has enough. And Fox looked at her and he said, no, that is true. And she said, oh, yes, it is. And so he flipped around and he pranced back to the woods. Well, she noticed, and here came Mrs. Wolf down through the grasses, and she waited till Wolf got pretty close to her, and she said, you're going to Farmer's Feast, aren't you? And she said, yes. And she said, well, you know why? And she said, no, I'm just a wolf and I was invited for your pups. You know those dogs up there on the change that howl at you when you try to sneak into Farmer's yard, that bark on you? That's what he wants. He wants more puppies. She said, what? He said, yeah, you're going to keep you in the cage and they're going to take your puppies. She said, well, I want no part of that. And she whipped back into the woods. Well, oh, Raven, she was feeling pretty good. She'd saved 3 of her friends. And as she was floating and hopping around, feeling really good, here come Pig down the road. He was a trotting, and she flew in front of him, and he goes, oh, she said, you were invited to Farmer's Feast, were you? And he said, yes. And she said, well, you know why? And Pig said, I don't care. I was invited to eat in their garden, and that's where I go. I'm not going to listen to you. And he just pushed her away, and he went trotting down the road just like he was. Pretty soon, here came Horse trotting out of the woods. And oh, did Horse look good? Smooth skin. He was just strong. He was walking down, and Crow sat on the fence waiting for him to get pretty close. And she said, Farmer's Feast, you were invited? He said, yes, I was. And I bet you weren't. She said, well, that's okay. But you know why I want you for that strength? He said, probably. He said, Farmer might overuse you. And she said, no, he won't. No, he won't. I'm strong and I can run away if I want. So Horse just trotted right up to the barn. And Raven was a little curious. So she went up there and they took Horse and they put a bit in his mouth and they had a rein around him. And then they led him to the barn. And she thought, oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. She said, I better tell the rest of my friends. So she went down, and just when she got there, here came Lady Cow. She had a grass necklace on her, and her baby heifer had a grass necklace on him. And they were so proud, they were so clean, and they were so happy. And Crow flew right up into their face and said, don't go. She said, well, were you invited to Farmer's Feast? And Raven said, no. And she says, well, then you're jealous. We're going. He said, they might eat you. They're going to use your milk. They'll take the heifer away. She said, I don't care what you're saying. I'm going. So she booted Raven out of the way, and Raven picked herself up and dusted herself off. And about that time, here came Deer. Oh, did Deer look good? It was a buck, and he had these beautiful horns. And Raven waited, and the buck came up, and she said, oh, you going to farmers' feasts? And the buck said, yeah. Said, doesn't farmer hunt you? And the buck thought, well, yeah. He said, well, you're going to be in a cage and you're going to be hunted that way. And that scared the buck so much that he ran away. And then pretty soon, here came old goat. And old goat was really slow and he had all these stickers in him. And Raven said, goat, why were you invited? He says, I don't know, but I'm old and I'm going to go enjoy my last few months or few years on the farm. And he walked by her. About that time, Cat strolled up and stroked him and wiggled her tail. And she said, yeah, I was invited. But you know what I did? I was supposed to take care of the mice and the rats in the barn, but I didn't want that farmer messing with me, so I scratched him and they're leaving me alone. Well, Raven, she couldn't believe it. She cried and she screamed and she went into the strawberries and tore those up. And then she went into where the cherries were growing and she picked them and threw them all over. And she waited about 2 or 3 weeks and she went back to see what her friends had done and what had happened to them. Well, the heifer was in the field. He looked really happy. He was big. And Cow, she was in the barn. She was eating oats and all these wonderful things. And she looked up and she said, sure, I'm happy here. I give milk. The farmer's wife makes cheese and I get all the grain and oats that I can eat. And they went to look at Pig and Pig looked really plump and happy. And he said, oh, I eat in the garden anything I want. And then she brings scraps out from the table. And then he looked at Sheep and she was so thin. And he said, she said, they took my fur off, that heavy, heavy coat. And she says, I feel so good. I feel clean. I feel fresh. I feel so light. And then he saw Goat and Goat was pulling this little cart and he had a rope around his neck. He says, what are you doing? He said, I'm helping the farmer's wife move her milk around. And then I get to go out in the field with Sheep and Cow. And this bell, see this bell on my neck? That tells the farmer if they're in harm or if I'm in harm. And Crow looked at everybody and she was kind of unhappy about that. They were really happy there. And she flew off to the highest tree that she could find and she squawked and she squawked. And she got to thinking and she said, I am free. I can eat where I want. I can nest where I want. I can fly all over. And I have made my choice and they have made their choice. And that's how it is for all of us. We make our choice of what we do and where we live and how we do it. And thank you very, very much for listening. It was very, very nice. And I hope my book does well. I'm still working on it. It'll be out soon. And thank all of you who have signed up for it and blah, blah, blah.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you. We make our choices.
Yes.
Well, the old is always new.
Yeah.
You always bring a special twist to every old story that you tell to keep it new. Thank you. All right. Next, speaking of a new twist, a very contemporary twist on very old stories. Here's Linda Wright, also with a story from Sheila Arnold's, right? Sheila Arnold's Fairy Tales and Social Justice class. And please welcome Linda.
Once upon a time, there was an ant. And this ant would go running quickly everywhere it could go, looking for food. But one day, he saw a chrysalis. Oh, look at that creature inside of it. It can hardly move. Oh, what kind of life can it have? Oh, I could run here and there. I could climb up a tree. I'm so free. But this thing, oh. And the creature inside of the chrysalis, it heard everything that the ant had to say, but it did not reply. A few days later, the ant came by that spot again, and the chrysalis was empty. And he thought, what happened to the creature inside of it? It must have died. Its life was not worth a dime. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the ant, and it was a beautiful butterfly with gorgeous wings, and the ant couldn't believe his eyes at what he was looking at. And the butterfly said, "Oh, my friend, the ant, you looked at me with such pity. Really, you despise my life. But now I get to fly wherever I want to, while you just stay on the earth and run hither and thither as you were boasting." And with those words, the butterfly flew away, and the ant was amazed. There was a baby who was born, a baby with flat nose, dark skin, beautiful eyes. And he was welcomed by his family into this world. But a few years later, when this baby was 2, the parents couldn't get along anymore, and they split. And the mother took the baby and the other children and moved into the projects. And there this baby grew until by the time he was in junior high school, he was over 6 feet tall. Basketball is going to be my ticket out. And he went on to college, but somehow his dreams crashed and burned. And there was no ticket out. He ended up with different jobs that were dead ends. He got into drugs. He fathered different children from place to place. He did some crimes, and he did do time. And people thought, his life is not worth a dime. One day, he found himself on the ground with the knee of another man on his neck. He could not breathe. And as he cried out, "Mama," the brown chrysalis of death closed around him. But out of that chrysalis, his spirit rose and it gained wings, and it became something different and powerful. And we looked on and saw, and we didn't realize that we would be changed. We weren't even expecting to be changed. But those wings carrying his spirit went around the world, fanning protests from shore to shore, even in countries where the people didn't even look like him. Do you know his name? Write his name in the chat if you know his name. Write his name in the chat. Let us see his name if you know his name. What is his name? Thank you. George Floyd. George Floyd is his name. Yes, his name is just flowing in the chat. George Floyd is his name. There were people who looked like George with flat noses and different colors of skin, brown and Black people, who were getting phone calls from people who did not look like them, who were saying, "It was awful. How are you doing? I mean, how are you and your family doing? What are you telling your children? This was something terrible." And those same people and others were going into online training, like, what can I do with my privilege? I've seen myself for the first time. What can I do to change? And then there were people in those meetings whose skin looked like George Floyd. And they were crying, saying, for the first time, I'm feeling like I'm being understood, and that there are resources being put out for children who look like George Floyd so that they won't be swept under the rug anymore, so that they'll get the training so they could fly and rise up and be something beautiful rather than find a life of crime. That aunt had looked at that butterfly with disdain, despising its life when it was inside of that chrysalis. But as it saw that butterfly flying away, he wished how that butterfly would return and be his friend. The end.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
The power of story. The power. All right. Please take. There we go. So thank you, SAC, and everybody, please, if you're not a member already, please consider, there's the website. So Sally?
Unmute, Sally.
All right. I was saying, what a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you so much. Let's unmute myself. There we go. There we go. All right. Lovely. Just again, just stories that are so potent, so right for the time. And since it's quite late and we need to say goodbye, I'm going to end with this lovely little brief story. A little boy came home from school and he was so excited. Mama, I got the best part in the play. Oh, honey, are you going to be the prince? Oh, no, it's a part better than that. Well, are you going to be the king? No, it's a part better than that even. Oh, my dear. And she knew that the class was doing the Frog Prince. So of course, then you're going to be the frog. No. Well, I can't guess. Are you going to be? I get to be the person that claps and cheers. And so that's what I want to do for this evening. I want to be the person that claps and cheers. I want to cheer for Liz, who even though she went to Israel, got the mailing list together, wrote the bulletin, sent them out, solicited the teachers, the tellers. So that's fabulous. I want to thank Marnie, who is our great, great technician and keeps this thing flowing just beautifully. And I want to thank Clara so much for sharing her skill and her time and her understanding of stories, and to all the people that called in, that came and volunteered to make our evening as wonderful as it always is. Thank you all so much. A big cheer and a big clap for you all. And good night. God bless. Take care. And we'll see you next month.